Hello everyone, welcome to OHV Explorer, and today we are going to talk about fuel capacity on an ATV, specifically with the CF Moto. We only get about 75 miles out of a tank of gas, and that depends of course if you're in 4 low or 2 high, hitting the whoops, or climbing rocks. With this ATV specifically, you can see we have the Rotopax mount. The Rotopax mount is a great idea for those people who can carry extra gas and don't mind stopping all the time. For the type of riding we do, which is extremely long distance riding, more of an overland style, we will cover 100 to 150 miles a day. We tend not to stop. We may stop for lunch. And with that, we had to come up with an idea of how to make that trip a little easier, try to do it on a tank of gas, make it a lot more convenient for riders. We experimented quite a bit with this idea, and what we came up with is not a novel idea by any means, but it is something we did as purely as an experiment. What we have done is we bought a marine outboard gas tank, 6-gallon from Cabela's. It's the Scepter version, and simply plumbed it directly into the top of the fuel tank. So plumbing it into the top of the fuel tank, all you have to do is remove the vent valve line and connect right onto the vent valve line and plumb the tank right out of the bottom of the marine tank. There's advantages and disadvantages of this, of course. Disadvantages, you have a giant red gas tank on the front of your four-wheeler, which some people would say doesn't look very good. But in this case, what we found out is Cabela's also sells these tote bags for about $20, and the marine outboard gas tank fits perfectly within this space. Some other things that we ran into while setting this up, and you could set this up with a fuel cell, which would probably be a little bit better way to go in my opinion, rather than this, again, experimental tank. The venting situation on marine tanks, as well as the ATV tank, they're as such where they're sealed for the most part. They only vent when they get above 5 psi. So they have to, if you carry a regular gas can, you know that they expand out a lot to release that pressure. So we've had to do some modifications on these, and I'll bring you in closer and show you the modifications we've done. Okay, so with the modifications we've done to this gas tank, you could see that the factory tank has this fuel sender built onto it, and it has a 1/4-inch NPT fitting. All we've done is we've stuck a solvent compliant fitting, which you can get at your local hardware store. And then we're using from freeflowhose.com this pretty nice check valve system. It is obviously for a dirt bike type setup or an older ATV. It's got a check valve built in here. So it allows venting to go out, but it's also a rollover check valve. Also on this gas tank, we use just strapping material to attach it to the rack, the front rack, and it worked out very well. It's very solid. It doesn't move. The whole four-wheeler moves. Pretty good setup there. Now, one of the other mods we had to do to this gas tank, and more specifically the gas cap of the CF Moto, is to allow for venting. What was interesting is when you start the four-wheeler, normally the vent line, which is this guy, leads down to the charcoal canister. When the four-wheeler is started, this valve would close due to the vacuum that's being pulled by the pump. So to get around that, you basically take a dirt bike vent valve, which are only about $4 or $5, and you simply drill out the center cap of the CF Moto, and you want to 2-part epoxy this pipe nipple in there. This is basically a 1/4-inch NPT by 1/4-inch nipple, and the dirt bike gas valve goes right on there. It's also a rollover prevention valve. So now that we covered the basics of this installation and experiment, if you will, let's go over the pluses and the minuses of this setup. So for the pluses, what you get, a lot more riding time in one shot. There is a quarter turn valve. I didn't show it to you, but there is a quarter turn valve down here on the side of the tank. So you can isolate the tank, which you need that, by the way, for this setup. So generally how it goes is I fill up this tank, I fill up the CF Moto tank, and that's a total of almost 10 gallons of gas. So it's 9 3/4 of a gallon. So essentially you can go about 225 miles of straight riding, not having to stop if you want to. The drawback is you will get a little bit of fuel smell. It's like an old ATV in that regard. You're venting to atmosphere instead of into the charcoal canister. So some of the next things of the experiment is to take this vent valve and attach it right to the charcoal canister now that it's kind of isolated and up out of the way. Easy to do, is just running some tubing. Have not done that yet. And, some other minuses, some people will say, well, what if I flip the four-wheeler over and it lands on this tank? Will it break the tank? Well, it is a marine grade tank. It won't break. There is fuel sloshing. That's why I would recommend maybe going to a fuel cell. And from a cost perspective, you could get a very, very nice fuel cell for around $119. I spent about probably $125 on this setup, which again, it's an experiment, so didn't have time to go, get cheaper parts off of Amazon. They're all from the local hardware store. And that covers our extended range fuel system that we have on the CF Motos. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them down there into the comment section. Be more than happy to answer any questions you have.